Hey there, we're back, episode 8, The Brother. Today I want to talk a little bit more about the brother. So we're going to take a little break of the flow of the story. I will talk a little bit later in the episode about the therapy that we're going through, but I just wanted to kind of touch base with the whole story with the brother a little bit more. So when I first met the brother, he was not really going to a lot of meetings. I would describe him as sloppy and maybe even selfish. Selfish is probably a really good description of him. In Spanish, you can say somebody is simpático, which means you find them like nice and endearing. He was the opposite of that when I met him. It was kind of like, that's your brother? Wow. And they seem polar opposite to me, like really completely, wow, night and day difference with these two. But it is what it is. So when we were getting married, we're kind of like establishing our wedding party. And I said to Troy, I think that you should have your brother in your wedding party. That's your brother, like family first, right? And Troy was kind of annoyed, and you could tell they didn't have good rapport with each other. But I think also he was kind of trying to put like a front up because, here we're about to get married and he doesn't want to really say anything bad about his family or whatnot. And so he's like, okay, if you think so. So we're at dinner one day out and about, and Troy asks his brother, will you be a groomsman in my wedding? And the brother answers, I don't think so. I think I'm going to be out of town that weekend. Like, okay, what? And I heard it and I just couldn't even believe it. Like, what? Okay. Well, the wedding then was coming up and the brother wasn't out of town. He came to the wedding and I really didn't know him well. I didn't really know anything about him. But we asked him if he could film the wedding. And this is before everyone had an iPhone and could film. You had to like get your camera. And so we gave him our camera fully loaded, blah, blah, blah. And then just to make sure, I had a backup person film as well because, it's your wedding once in a lifetime. Can't get that back. Well, the backup person actually forgot the camera at home. Well, I didn't really realize any of this was going on. It's my wedding day. So way past the wedding day, we're back from the honeymoon and all this, and we're asking for where the tape is. We asked the brother, like, did you film? And he hands us back our camera and we go home and watch it. And he did not film the wedding. And it was just like, wow. It was upsetting because there was a bunch of family of mine who couldn't make it, who I promised, we'll send you the video. And now you can't get that back. It's not like you're ever going to have that wedding again. And so Troy was very mad, and he's like, I'm not even going to talk to him anymore. I can't stand that guy. And I was pretty mad too, because there's nothing you can do to undo this. And why didn't he film? Like, why? He had the camera. It was loaded. The battery was ready. There was film in it. Like, why? It just seemed like out of spitefulness. Like, he was mad that his brother was getting married and, like, gonna have a family and all this. It just seemed like really, like, out of being mean. And so I was just like, this guy's weird anyways. Had such a weird vibe with him. And the dad called me one day and was kind of trying to make amends. Like, can't you get them to talk to each other? And I'm like, well, it's hard. There's hurt feelings and stuff. And he's like, yeah, but we're all Jehovah's Witnesses and blah, blah, blah. And I really didn't really care because I didn't really want to be close to the brother. He gave me the heebie-jeebies. Like, my gut feeling was, this is not really like a person I trust, And I have to say, too, he had, like, a decent job and stuff. So the whole family are very intelligent. Like, they're intelligent people. And the brother happened to have, like, book smarts, too. So he had a decent job. for our wedding. He gave us nothing. And I know that's not like supposed to be expected or whatnot, but it is kind of like common courtesy to do that. And the brother didn't get us anything, and I don't care, whatever, But then when we had the baby and the baby shower, the brother, again, didn't really give us anything. That's fine. I don't expect much from like him. He was a bachelor. We were in clothes. It's fine. Well, as the baby got a little bit older and started walking, we went over to the parents' house, and the brother shows up with a big gift. A big gift. Like a kind of weird big gift, because you didn't really get us anything for the wedding or shower. Why are you getting this kid something like pretty big now? And later I noticed too, he was giving like cousins in the family and stuff inappropriately big gifts, where I'm like, that's weird, especially when you're not really a known gift giver. It's one thing if you're just like that and you do that with everybody, but to just target like the younger children, that's kind of weird. And so we're at the parents' house, and he's like, oh, the kid is so cute, you should let me take him to the mall. I bet you that's a real chick magnet. And I'm just like, yeah, you're not going to take him to the mall. Like, no. And I was super protective. We really didn't leave the kids with anybody except my mom and sometimes his parents. But I said to Troy, I don't really feel comfortable leaving the kids at your parents' house because I don't know when your brother's going to show up. And at this point, I knew nothing else about the brother except my gut feeling. And Troy's like, well, my parents are there. It'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't want to be gone and he shows up. I don't trust him with the kids. And he got a little mad at me, like as if I wasn't trusting his parents. And I'm like, it's not your parents, it's your brother. But whatever. But so for the most part, it was really my mom. We were already really careful with who's going to watch the kids. And so his brother kept saying like, oh, I got him this big expensive toy. Well, not in those words, but basically, you should let me take him for a ride. And I'm like, no. And he's like, you should let me take him to the mall. And I'm like, no. And that was just so weird. So weird. It just was so weird. So a while later, when all this stuff came out that the brother had abused Troy, I was first of all saying, my gut told me something was wrong with this dude, but you were going to kind of put our kids in harm's way. And at this point, we had already found a therapist, and the therapist said to him, you should never risk anything with your children. And it's just that is in my mind. It always has been, because she was right. You shouldn't risk anything. If your gut tells you something's not right, don't do it. And he's like, well, I was offended because, my parents, it's like as if she doesn't trust my parents. And the therapist was saying, and I mean, I feel bad saying this because I don't think his parents were to blame, but they didn't really protect him from what happened. I don't know, the mom was at home. I don't know how she didn't see what was going on. And I'm going to speak freely here. I'm so confused about all this anyways. It was just a really confusing time and a confusing issue because Troy was a kid. His brother is a few years older. But his brother was basically a kid too and started grooming. So it's hard because they're basically still both kids, but there is abuse going on. And the counselor, she said that she thinks that somebody also abused the brother, but we couldn't figure out who. So because she said that it doesn't just happen with people. It's taught behavior. And we didn't know, but I was just like a wreck because at this point, what do you do? It's not like he's going to press charges against his brother, but at the same time, well, he's not a safe person, and I just didn't want to be around him with the kids. I was really upset. And thankfully he quit going to meetings and he moved away. And I thought, all right, prayers answered. I don't have to deal with him anymore. And since he wasn't going to meetings, I was just like, all right, other kids aren't really exposed to him. This is all pretty good. And for me, I felt relief because he had now gone and lived so far away that we really weren't at risk, like, seeing him. And I don't even think, like, the youngest ever met his uncle. I think they forget that they even have an uncle, because that's just out of sight, out of mind, never see him. So it is kind of a tough issue, though, because in my mind, I always, like, I'm thinking back and forth, like, was Troy a willing participant? Yes, he was groomed, but then was it, you know how if it's an adult, it's always abuse. Like, if it's the adult abusing a kid, it's always abuse. But when it's two kids, how do you label that? And, like, was he really, like, abused? Yes, he was groomed. So, yes, he was abused in that sense. But then later on, was he a willing participant? Like, this whole thing was just really, like, messed up. It really was. And I will say this, too. I got a lot of flack from the family for being open. I am open. I'm an open person. And especially in the Jehovah's Witness religion, and I'm sure in other religions, too, the label of gossip is so evil and awful. And I'm sure it's a way to control women to not talk. But the truth of the matter is, everybody talks. Men talk too. This whole label of gossip is such baloney. It just is there to control people. And with this family, they were so extremely private. They labeled everything as gossip. And that's so nice when you have, like, the umbrella of the religion and you can counsel people all the time. But basically, I said one time, hey, did you know so-and-so got engaged? And I got reprimanded right away. I shouldn't be gossiping. And it really puts you on edge. Like, what am I allowed to talk about? What am I allowed not to talk about? Or the whole birth control thing, you know, Troy was, like, on me for even talking about it. And it's really hard when you were raised open and honest, and now you have to, like, watch everything. I mean, high control religion plus high control, like, husband really sucks. And then it's me, like, I feel like I'm getting in trouble all the time. And another part of me that feels okay talking about all of this is, what, you know, Troy put himself on the internet. Yes, with a fake name, but definitely with real stuff about his person, with photos. I'll tell you more about this later. The story has only just begun. It just keeps getting, like, quote unquote worse. But he put himself on there. He put his photos out there. So you put yourself on the internet first, buddy, you know, and now the way it affected me and the family, you know what? I get to talk about it because I didn't choose it. I was the one that had to carry all this and, like, deal with it somehow. And part of dealing with it for me is talking about it and being able to help others, really, because I was going through it at the time, and the stories and experiences from others can really help someone. So, yeah, some of these things are sensitive, but by doing all this stuff that he did, you know what? I get to talk about this. It's healing. And yes, the privacy of my children is kind of important. So hence, you know, it's hard for them. They don't know all this stuff about their dad. So they don't necessarily need to know all the nitty gritty, but it's anonymous. It'll be okay. So I wanted to touch on finding a therapist really quick. That is a really tough thing. So, and as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were really not encouraged to do therapy. You're supposed to talk to the elders, pray, blah, blah. Well, clearly we were at a point right now after, like, these sex emails to guys on the internet, like, we needed therapy. And then all this other stuff had come out with abuse and Bethel and glory holes. And it was time for a therapist. And honestly, the elders, they didn't even know what to say. So they didn't say anything about us going to therapy. And I knew that I needed it. And if we were going to fix this and he was to, like, overcome his past, well, he needed it too. So he was okay to go. Jehovah's Witnesses don't have a lot of money. Therapy was $100 a week. But honestly, for me, it was worth it because we needed it. But when you're not having a lot of money and you have kids and you're a Jehovah's Witness, that's a lot of money. So, alas, it is what it is. We went to the first therapist, and he turned out to be some, like, other religious therapist, which we weren't really comfortable. Plus, he was weird. I think we went to, like, a second one. And then you kind of have to, like, tell the whole story every time. But if it's not a good fit, it is what it is. So you kind of got to do it. And then we went to one who lived kind of far. So it was a drive to his office. But he was pretty good. So Troy would go by himself, I would go by myself, and then we would go together. One day I show up to this therapist's office, and he had met with Troy several times on his own already. And he told me this story about how this lady, she came home and the guy was cheating. She packed her bags and was out. And basically, like, she got to live her life free from, like, all this cheating, anxiety, baloney, because she left right away. And I looked at the therapist, and I was like, well, I'm not here to, like, leave. I'm here to make my marriage work. And see, like, in hindsight, I think that Troy, you know, had his therapy session, and the therapist was like, you can't fix this, like, this is shot, you know. And I did not want to hear that at the time. I had babies, and also my parents are divorced, and I think I made this life decision as a kid. I will never get divorced. Like, that was just in my head. Well, I already now had gone through one divorce, thankfully, quick, easy, painless, no kids. But I really was like, once I have kids, I never want to get divorced. And that's kind of wrong thinking to think like that, because sometimes you have to divorce. And it's better to divorce because you can't stay. It's worse if you stay in an abusive relationship. It's worse for everyone. But in my mind, I thought, I don't want to get divorced. I don't want to put my kids through it. I want to be a happy family. It takes two to make a happy family. It takes two. And it takes one to ruin it. And this guy was really not doing his part still, even though I stayed throughout, like, this major hiccup. And the therapist, I felt like, was really trying to, like, nudge me along, like, girl, you know, why? This is, like, hopeless, basically. But I was upset. I'm like, I don't even want to talk to him anymore. What? I mean, he's trying to get me to leave. Like, that's not the point. We need marriage counseling. So then we found another therapist, and this one was closer, and I actually felt much more comfortable and open, and it just felt really good. I do really think that this therapist really helped. Like, really, it was a good start. I mean, I feel like my journey to breaking up and divorcing took so long. It's like, honestly, like a journey, because it just was very hard. But this therapist, one day she met with me, and she said, I want you to protect yourself. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, just be really careful. And I know it's like, you can't really disclose anything, but I think she was like implying for me to have safe sex with my husband because I was at risk. And I was so confused. I'm like, what? And I knew that Troy kind of came and talked, you know, in his own session, so I don't know what he's telling him. But I feel like at this point, the therapist showed humanity too. She didn't disclose secret information, but she really, I feel like she cared for me, and she wanted me to be okay. She wanted me to be safe. And I'm like, I didn't really, because I didn't have the full information, but it still sticks in my head that I thought, that's kind of weird. So tomorrow we're going to talk about more. There's a few more incidents, more things that happen. And later on we'll get more into the brother stuff too, because that is a whole other story. And really, these podcasts are kind of like my vocal book, because this story could be a book. It is winding and a roller coaster. So hold on tight. Thanks for listening.